Well, hey there, I'm Hank, and this is CBMF, and we're talking about Preacher Episode 2 today. First thing in this second episode of Preacher is we meet the Saint of Killers, whose origin seems fairly consistent to what we're shown in the books. He's a man of few words from a time in America when life was cheap. He's a father to a sick child he needs to fetch medicine for. I do like the musical cues. And it's clear that he comes from a very bleak and violent world. 1881. Then we get back into the modern age. For the first part of the second episode, it feels like they're playing a lot of catch-up. Cassidy is sleazy. Jesse and Tulip have a past, and she wants him to do something that he says he won't do. The church is run down. There's a boy with a face like an arse. There's a bit of telling over showing in how Jesse says directly to Cass, "I like having you around." But maybe they're making Jesse a bit more open to show how sleazy it is that Cass rips him off later. Oh right, and the guy who's thinking about being a pedophile and bragging about it, that's a bit weird. Over the top? I'm just not sure what I'm supposed to make of a guy who casually says, "I really want to have sex with this little girl who rides my school bus." It's a weird scene. I'm not sure I can buy the reality of it. Like, why is this guy so cool about just talking about being a pedophile? I'm not sure if it's the script or the actor, but I just can't really get my head around it. Cinematically, there's some great shots that do give the show a texture reminiscent of the book. Odin Quincannon is introduced. Initially, I thought it was an odd scene, but knowing what happens later in the series, I realized that it's foreshadowing, and essentially introducing the core of Odin's wants. He wants land to build on. He wants to knock down other people's shit to build his own stuff. That's the ultimate takeaway. Oh, and he's kind of creepy in a way that suggests that maybe he's really into all the blood and guts of his meatpacking business. In the show, he's perhaps a little more nuanced than he was in the books. When Jesse and Cass get talking, that's the show at the best for me. The two voices really contrast each other well, and watching them argue passionately, albeit drunkenly, and then break into laughter, it's what I like about the show the most. Cass dropping his backstory in for the audience as a joke to Jesse was sort of hilarious but enjoyable. There's a bit where the angel sings, and it's sort of random. It feels a bit weird for the sake of weird, but that's allowable, I guess. And then we get Cass versus the angels. Really, I think it's the best action sequence of the series, though I've only seen the first 7 episodes at this point. But it's a lot of fun. The chainsaw, Cass being a bit of an idiot throughout the fight. It's so Evil Dead 2. Buckets of blood all over the place, mayhem like an itchy and scratchy episode. Total chaos, total carnage. The stuff with the whorehouse Tulip grew up in. Again, I can't quite place it. Maybe I've never hung out in a Texas whorehouse. I don't know what it's supposed to be like. It's fun that the vampires are enough of a convention that you can just drop them into a story. I've always liked that about the comic. No need to explain where vampires come from, it's just a vampire. Bam, there he is. Oh, and he's also a cunt. We get the bit where Jesse goes to console a grieving mother who's sitting with her comatose daughter. And she tells Jesse that him and his useless prayers and his useless God can go fuck themselves. It's not the smoothest writing in the world, but it's a good scene. And like the material with Jesse and Cassidy, it's what I think I enjoy the most when I'm watching the show. People having legit conversations about faith in God. Tulip reminds me a little of Tank Girl sometimes. She's wild and violent and dangerous. In the book, she's much more controlled and maybe even a little sweeter. But I love Tank Girl. And when I change my expectations, or just try to abandon them altogether, I find myself getting more out of the show. Jesse seems very lost. His message seems to be, abandon yourself to God. Give up, and let God carry you. Oh, until Jesse goes to see the man who's been thinking about being a pedophile and half drowns, half scalds him in hot water. I had really mixed feelings about this. I guess the guy basically did brag to Jesse that he planned to molest a little girl. But it's also weird seeing Jesse torture a man for having bad thoughts, punishing the deed before it transpires. I guess we're seeing that Jesse is not a righteous man, He's a man of rage and violence. As Tulip says, he's not a good man. He's a bad man pretending to be a good one. That's the idea anyway. And I feel like that's what the scene is meant to convey. That we shouldn't relax with Jesse and just assume he's always doing the right thing. He can be a bit of an intense fucker. Jesse in the Word is an odd thing. In the book, it's far more obvious and clear-cut. Almost like with Cass being a vampire. You can tell what the word is and how it does what it does. In the show, you're far less certain as to the outcome when the word is used. It's a bit of a monkey's paw. That thing where you make a wish, but the granting of the wish always subverts your desires, making you rue your wish-making ways. It felt like a really long episode. Again, the Cassidy and Jesse stuff is the best for me. And visually, it's a pleasant watch. Still a bit heavy-handed, still a bit too much for telling instead of showing, but overall, I can appreciate this chapter's place in the larger narrative, both cementing what we'd learned previously, and setting up all the beats for the rest of the season, essentially. And that's Preacher Episode 2. Guess we'll see y'all down the dusty trail.